Hey guys, tonight we step into a place where the stones have been waiting far too long and the air itself feels like it is remembering something it can't tell you. You probably won't survive this if you wander off alone, so stay close. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you are feeling bold, drop your location and local time in the comments just so we know who is walking into this with us. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. The gate ahead should be groaning on its hinges, but it does not. Instead it yawns open into a twilight that never quite fades. My footsteps land softly on flagstones worn smoother than glass, yet they make no echo, as if the city swallows sound on purpose. The scent here is strange, dry yes, but threaded with fennel and something metallic, almost like old coins. I glance back instinctively, but the road I came down is gone, replaced by a wall that should not exist. I tell myself it is just my mind catching up to the dim light, but that is a lie. Even I do not believe. The outer buildings loom like watchers, their brick and marble cloaked in shadows that stay fixed no matter how I move. Rome had hundreds of cities scattered across its empire, each a perfect blend of function and display, but this one is incomplete, not ruined exactly, no cracked columns or toppled statues, more like a stage set after the actors have left props in place, audience gone. In the square ahead stands a sundial, its gnomon jutting defiantly into the sky. Only the shadow refuses to creep, as though time itself has been excused from duty here. Historians still debate whether some ancient cities deliberately manipulated time through ritual or architecture, but here the effect feels uncomfortably literal. I pass beneath an arch engraved with a Latin inscription so worn it should be illegible, yet my eyes trace the letters effortlessly, as though my mind already knows them. Tempus hic servet seos. Time here keeps its own. I think about fringe theories I once read about forgotten Roman colonies built to test the boundaries of human perception, little experiments in controlling the senses of an entire population. Most scholars dismiss them, but standing here it is harder to laugh them off. The street slopes gently, and each building I pass seems a little taller, as though I am walking deeper into some vast amphitheater of stone. Above, the sky is wrong, washed in bronze instead of blue, and the clouds are frozen mid-whirl. I test it by holding up a finger, measuring a tiny wisp of vapor against the edge of a roof. 5 minutes later, it has not shifted. A cool draft curls around my ankles, and I follow it to a recessed doorway where a heavy curtain of red wool sways in a non-existent breeze. The fabric is embroidered with laurel leaves and golden bees, a motif I recall from Augustus' reign, though here the bees have tiny human faces. Inside is a narrow vestibule lined with frescoes. They are vibrant, too vibrant for their age, and one depicts a man at a gate exactly like the one I just entered, flanked by 2 dogs made of shadow. I step closer, and the paint shimmers faintly as though it is wet. My fingertips tingle before I even touch it, so I pull back. Roman artists often used encaustic methods, mixing pigment with hot wax, but this feels more alive than technique could explain. In the corner of the fresco, a figure stands half hidden behind a column face, obscured hand outstretched as though beckoning. A faint sound pricks my ears, like a breath pulled in and never released. I turn sharply. Nothing moves. The street outside is empty, yet I can't shake the sensation that someone is just out of sight, pacing me step for step. Rome was never truly silent. Its markets, baths, and forums hummed with life. Here the silence is a texture wrapping around me, pressing against my ribs. The weight of it makes me want to whisper, though there is no one to hear. By the time I reach the forum square, the air feels heavier, warmer. The basilica's columns are perfectly aligned, their shadows pooling neatly at their bases like ink. A pigeon lies motionless on the steps. Not dead, just still, eyes open, feathers ruffling slightly, though there is no wind. It blinks once slowly and does not move again. I skirt around it, my shoes brushing the fine dust that coats everything. It sticks oddly to my soles like ash. Somewhere far off, a single chime rings, deep, resonant, impossible to place. I decide to find its source, but as I step forward, I notice something else. My own shadow has stopped moving. It holds position no matter how I turn, rooted like one of the marble statues watching from their pedestals. That is when I realize those statues are facing me now. And I do not remember them doing that before. The statues do not blink, but the longer I look, the more certain I become that they are waiting for me to turn my back, their white marble eyes fixed with a patience only stone can afford. I force myself to walk, each step slow, my own breathing unnaturally loud in this place where nothing else seems willing to make a sound. The square stretches longer than it should. A trick of perspective, maybe, or maybe the city shifts when you are not looking. I pass a collapsed column whose capital has rolled to the edge of the paving stones, yet there is no dust in its fluting. As if it fell yesterday or perhaps never truly fell at all. I remember the hanging trap from the arena yesterday and wonder how many of these streets hold their own quiet snares. The warmth grows underfoot and I trace it to a narrow alley where a thread of heat seeps from beneath the stones. Crouching, I touch the surface and feel a pulse. Not mechanical. Not like the hypocaust systems of Roman baths, but slower, heavier, like the city's own heartbeat. At the end of the alley a doorway yawns, the lintel carved with sheaves of wheat and amphorae. Inside is darker than it should be. The air thick with a faint briny tang that makes me think of fish, sauce and salted olives. My eyes adjust to find rows of amphorae stacked to the ceiling, each sealed with wax and marked with ink. Some bear dates from emperors long dead. Some carry no date at all, and one, the nearest to me, bears my name in looping cursive. The wax is unbroken, but the jar is warm to the touch. Historians still debate whether some amphorae were used as offerings to household gods or as vessels for messages in rituals lost to time. A fringe theory even claims they were containers for memories, poured into liquid form and stored for when the living forgot too much. I pull back from the amphora and my elbow catches a smaller vessel on the shelf. It topples but does not shatter. Landing soundlessly, when I lift it, the seal is gone and the inside is empty yet damp. I can't tell if that is worse than finding it full. A faint light pulses at the far end of the storeroom and I edge toward it. My shoes scrape softly against the floor, a rhythm that suddenly stops when I do. I look back, nothing, but the dust pattern on the floor has changed. Now 2 sets of footprints instead of 1, both leading deeper in. The warmth intensifies until it is almost uncomfortable, and then the room opens into a courtyard. In its center is a hearth, the ancient kind that should be surrounded by a family sharing bread and stories. Yet here there is only a ring of bricks and a bed of ash. No flames, but the heat radiates in steady waves. Roman hearths or faculae were central to domestic life, tended daily, never allowed to go cold. Yet this one, though choked in ash, feels freshly stoked. I kneel, brushing the surface with my hand, and a small puff rises, carrying with it the scent of fennel again. Sharper now, I glance at the surrounding walls and notice niches, holding terracotta figurines, Lara's perhaps, their tiny faces fixed in faint smiles. One niche is empty, the dust outline suggesting something recently removed. I hear the faint scrape of pottery from somewhere nearby. My pulse jumps. I follow the sound toward a shadowed archway. The heat fades as I pass beneath it, and I emerge into a colonnade where light from the bronze-tinted sky seeps in between columns. The floor is a mosaic of wheat fields, shifting subtly when I am not looking directly at it, as if the stalks sway in a breeze that does not exist. At the far end stands a heavy bronze door, embossed with scenes of harvest and sacrifice. My hand hovers near it when I feel a rush of air at my back, warm, insistent, and I turn quickly just in time to see one of the amphorae from the storeroom now standing in the middle of the colonnade where it could not possibly have rolled on its own. Its wax seal broken, the scent of fennel overwhelming. The shadows between the columns seem to lengthen toward me, and for a moment I swear I hear whispering in a language I can't quite understand. Something about an oath and the keeping of days. The amphora tips slightly as though nudged by invisible fingers. and from its mouth a single bead of liquid slides down the clay, dark and gleaming, before falling soundlessly onto the mosaic, where it is absorbed instantly. The wheat stalks in the design shiver, and every column in the hall seems to lean infinitesimally closer to me. The columns hold their tilt just long enough for me to question whether I imagined it, then straighten in unison as if some silent conductor had given the cue. I step back, but the mosaic underfoot has already changed. The wheat fields now cut into neat bundles bound with twine, and in the distance of the image a tiny figure appears, a dark speck walking toward the foreground with a burden on its shoulder. I blink and the speck is gone, yet the twine bindings on the wheat remain. I edge along the colonnade toward a staircase curling downward. The stone steps smooth from centuries of use, the air cool and tinged with mineral dampness. Water drips somewhere below with perfect regularity. Roman engineers built aqueducts that could carry water for miles, but this sound feels closer, more intimate, as if it belongs to a single hidden cistern. At the base of the stairs I find a narrow tunnel arched overhead, the walls coated with a thin sheen of moisture. In the middle of the passage runs a shallow channel, and water glides through it faster than the slope should allow. I crouch, touching the flow. It is cold but not unpleasant, and when I lift my hand the droplets on my skin slide upward toward my wrist before sinking into the fabric of my sleeve. I follow the channel until it emerges into a long vaulted hall lined with stone benches. The hum of moving water deepens here, resonating in my ribs. Historians still debate the acoustics of Roman baths and whether certain halls were designed to enhance whispers or chants. Fringe theories speak of spaces tuned to specific frequencies meant to induce calm or trance. I lower myself onto one of the benches and the stone is unexpectedly warm. Beneath my feet the floor vibrates faintly, a hypocaust perhaps, though I smell no smoke, just the mineral tang and a faint sweetness like pressed grapes. In the center of the hall a pool of water mirrors the bronze sky outside, but instead of reflecting my face it shows an aerial view of the city. Tiny roofs and streets, and in one of the plazas a speck of movement, too small to identify. Ripples distort the image, and when they clear the speck is gone. I lean closer. The edge of the pool rising higher than it should. The surface now level with my eyes, though I have not moved. The water bulges without spilling, forming the faint outline of an arch. And beyond it shapes move as though I am looking into another room. I hear the chime again, low and patient, and the water shivers in time with it. Suddenly a drop falls from above, striking the surface and sending rings outward. And in those rings I see faces, half-formed, flickering, turning away as if shy. I blink and the water is just water again. My pulse uneven, I stand, intending to leave. But the benches have shifted, now all angled toward the pool, the way seats would be arranged in a small theater. I retreat into the tunnel, the hum fading behind me. Yet when I reach the staircase it no longer leads up. Instead it descends further into darkness. The sound of water replaced by a muffled chorus, of voices speaking Latin too fast for me to follow. My feet move on their own, carrying me down into a chamber lit by thin shafts of light from holes in the ceiling. At the center stands a marble basin carved with dolphins, each spout dripping slowly into the bowl. The water inside glows faintly. I step closer and see coins scattered on the bottom, some with emperors I recognize, others with faces I have never seen in any museum or textbook. I reach in to touch one and the water feels warm. The coin slips beneath my fingers like a fish, vanishing into the depths. I pull my hand back quickly, droplets sliding off and leaving no wetness behind. From somewhere beyond the basin comes a soft splash, and I know I am not alone in here. I turn slowly toward the sound, my eyes adjusting to the dim where the shafts of light fall like pale columns. Onto the floor, between two of them a shape hovers just above the surface of the water. It is not solid, more like a distortion, the kind you see rising off sun-baked stone. Only here the air is cool. The shimmer tilts as if studying me, then glides backward through a narrow arch at the far end of the chamber. I hesitate, the arch low enough that I will have to duck. But the only other way is back toward the pool that already felt too curious about me. I step forward, the marble underfoot polished by feet I can't imagine. The arch opens into a gallery lined with statues, dozens of them, each the size of a man. Each frozen mid-step as though they were caught walking toward the center where a plinth stands empty. Their eyes carved deeper than usual for Roman work. The shadows inside their sockets so dark it is as if they have been hollowed out completely. My own reflection flashes faintly in the polished marble of their tunics, too quick, like it is flinching from me. At the far end a bronze door sits ajar. Behind it a staircase spirals upward. I follow it into a circular chamber whose walls are painted with scenes of the Forum, the colors unervingly fresh. In the center a low stone table holds a scattering of objects, wax tablets, a stylus, a small knife, a half-burned candle, and at the very edge an hourglass lying on its side, sand frozen mid-fall. Historians still debate whether Roman timekeeping devices were ever used symbolically in rituals rather than just practically. Fringe theories suggest hourglasses could be prepared with powders or liquids to manipulate perception. I pick it up and the sand immediately drops, fast, far too fast, spilling into the bottom globe in less than a heartbeat. The air in the chamber seems to pull inward as if I have opened a door to a storm. The candle flame jumps to life though I never lit it. Shadows whip around the curved walls, merging and separating into shapes I almost recognize. Then the hourglass grows hot in my hand. I drop it. It hits the table but does not break. Instead the sand swirls in place as if stirred by an invisible spoon. The candle gutters and goes out, leaving only the dim wash from a slit window high above. I step back, my heel striking something on the floor. It is a bronze disc, inscribed with lines radiating from a central point like a sundial without its gnomon. I pick it up and the lines seem to shift under my gaze, pointing not outward but inward, all meeting at a single mark that glows faintly. I slip it into my satchel before I can think too much about it. The candle smoke clings to the air. Smelling faintly of fennel again, I leave the chamber and return to the gallery of statues. Only now the plinth in the center is no longer empty. A new figure stands there, carved from pale stone, wearing clothes exactly like mine. The head tilted just enough that I know its eyes are fixed on me. I do not remember breathing as I back away, my shoulder brushing one of the older statues, its stone arm cold and unyielding. But I swear I feel the faintest squeeze against my skin before I bolt for the archway. The narrow street draws me onward, its paving stones gleaming faintly in the half-light, as though they have been polished by an invisible crowd that no longer exists yet still passes here each day. The air is thick with that now familiar blend of fennel and old coins. But there is something else under it tonight, a faint note of wet clay, like the scent of pottery still cooling from the kiln. The buildings rise higher on either side. They're insulated stacked with dark window mouths that watch in silence. Some of the windows glint as if glass panes remain, though most Roman apartments would have relied on wooden shutters or woven mats. And yet here I see faint reflections shifting in those panes even when I stand still, as if someone far above is moving from room to room carrying a light I can't quite see. I pass a doorway left ajar, the interior black as pitch, but from deep inside comes the unmistakable sound of water dripping into a shallow basin, the slow, irregular rhythm pulling at my curiosity. I step closer, but the air turns colder and the drip fades until all I hear is my own heartbeat. I back away and the sound resumes, one drop falling like a single heartbeat after another. I continue down the lane and notice that the amphorae stacked against one wall are sweating, fine beads of liquid forming and rolling down their sides. In the torchlight their surfaces seem to shiver. Fringe theories about Roman urban storage speak of special amphorae that could regulate Temperature, keeping goods cool through the same principle as porous clay allowing evaporation. But none of those accounts mention amphorae that sweat in the cold. I run my fingers over one and the moisture is thicker than water, almost oily, leaving a sheen on my skin that won't wipe away. Further on the lane opens into a small courtyard where a fountain gurgles softly. Its centerpiece a statue of a boy holding a dolphin, a familiar motif in Roman art. Yet here the dolphin's eye sockets are hollow, water spilling from them instead of the mouth. It cascades into a basin ringed by broken amphorae handles, as if the vessels sacrificed their usefulness to build this shrine. I notice the water is not pooling in the basin at all. It flows down through the handles into some unseen channel below. The sound of it is strangely melodic, almost like a tune you could hum if you dared. Historians still debate whether certain Roman fountains were tuned by shaping their channels, producing distinct harmonics. But as I listen, I realize this tune is not repeating. It is changing subtly, like a whisper forming words I can't understand. I circle the fountain and find a set of steps leading down into darkness. The walls here are damp and close. My footsteps quicken involuntarily. At the bottom I emerge into a vaulted chamber whose floor is a perfect mosaic of the surrounding city seen from above. Only in this mosaic the streets seem slightly altered, unfamiliar alleys branching where none existed above. I kneel to examine one of these alleys and see a tiny moving shadow. As if someone or something is walking through it in miniature, I reach out and my fingertip touches cold stone. But when I pull back, there is a smudge of that same oily moisture on my skin, now glistening faintly in the dim light. In the corner of the chamber stands a low table with wax tablets and a reed pen. The tablets are covered in Latin phrases, some neat, some hurried and jagged. One reads in translation, "Bread delivered, mouths uncounted." Another, "The shutters must not close at dusk." The last is fresher than the others, the wax still soft, and it simply says, "You have been seen." The reed pen beside it is damp at the tip, as though just lifted from ink. A faint rustle comes from behind me, and I turn to find that the entrance steps are gone, replaced by a solid wall of stone. The only way forward is through a low arch in the opposite corner. The arch carved with a repeating motif of keys and grain stalks, the keys pointing downward. I duck through into a narrow corridor lined with niches, each niche containing a loaf of bread as if freshly baked. The scent of warm crust fills the air, yet the loaves glisten unnaturally as though brushed with the same oily sheen. I reach for one, but it seems to pulse faintly beneath my fingers, not like heat but like breath. I let go quickly. The corridor ends in another courtyard, this one lit by a cold pale glow from above, and in the center sits a massive granary door bound in iron. Faint scratches mark its surface, tally marks in groups of 7. I step closer to count them but stop when I hear a slow creak from the other side. Chains shifting in the dark, moving without hands. The sound grows louder, metal against stone, and then stops all at once, leaving the air too still, too expectant. I take one step back, the stone under my heel sinking just slightly, and from somewhere deep behind the door comes the sound of grain pouring as if from a great height. The hiss of countless seeds falling into the dark. The hiss of falling grain does not fade. It deepens, turning from the sound of harvest into something heavier, like a distant tide dragging pebbles across the shore. I step away from the iron-bound granary door, but the sound follows. Crawling along the walls, the pale glow above seems to dim with each beat of my heart, and I realize the light is not moonlight at all, but a reflection from somewhere high in the stacked arches. Above, a shard of polished metal swaying slightly as if suspended. The Romans were known for clever uses of polished bronze and silver to direct light into dark interiors. But this piece moves on its own, flashing dull beams that catch the iron bands of the door, making them look like wet muscle under skin. I turn toward the courtyard's far side and find another archway, narrower than the rest, flanked by 2 low pedestals, each bearing a stone jar sealed. with lead. One jar is marked with the numeral 6, the other with 9. I brush the dust from the 6 and my fingertips come away with a faint metallic taste in the air, like touching a coin and then breathing. In fringe theories say lead-sealed jars in Roman storehouses sometimes held ritual substances, ashes or powders used in grain purification rites, though no record explains why some were numbered. I resist the urge to open them, stepping instead into the passage beyond. The floor slopes gently downward and the scent shifts, damp straw, old oil, and something faintly sweet like overripe figs. The sound of the grain hiss is gone now, replaced by a slow rhythmic tapping ahead. I press on until the walls open into a long, dim hall lined with alcoves. Each alcove contains a figure sitting, cross-legged, wrapped head to toe in linen, more like the funerary wrappings of distant Egypt than anything Roman. Yet each one wears a bronze mask, some serene, some snarling. The tapping comes from the farthest figure, its bronze mask tilted toward me, a long reed or staff tapping the floor in steady intervals. Historians still debate the extent of Rome's contact and ritual exchange with Egypt. But these figures are like no artifact I have seen. I approach slowly and see that the tapping staff is not in the figure's hand at all but leaning against its shoulder, moving on its own. I pass the first alcove and notice that the eyes behind the bronze mask are visible, glassy but not lifeless. Following me as I move, I keep walking, trying not to show that my skin crawls with every step. The tapping slows when I am halfway down the hall. The air heavier now, the sweet fig scent sharper, turning almost rancid. The last figure sits before a shallow pool of black liquid. Not water, thicker and without reflection. I crouch to examine it. And the tapping staff dips once into the liquid and back out. A ripple spreading across the surface. Within the ripple an image forms, me standing exactly as I am now. But behind me in the image the linen-wrapped figures are all standing, their bronze masks gleaming. I spin around and the hall is unchanged, all seated and still, but the image on the liquid surface now shows me walking away, back toward the courtyard. Only my reflection self is carrying something heavy in both arms. A sack perhaps. The ripple fades and the liquid becomes featureless black again. I stand quickly and back away. But as I reach the arch, the tapping resumes. Faster now, like an impatient summons. I take the corridor back toward the granary courtyard, but when I emerge the door is slightly open. A gap just wide enough to show darkness beyond. The hiss of grain has stopped entirely, replaced by a slow grinding, stone on stone, and then from the gap comes a dry breath, unmistakable, warm against my cheek, carrying with it the scent of fennel stronger than ever. I stumble back, eyes locked on that sliver of dark, but the door does not open further. Instead, a single grain of wheat rolls out onto the stones, stopping exactly at the tip of my shoe. I bend to look at it and realize it is made of gold, heavier than it should be, and inscribed with a mark that looks disturbingly like an eye. The golden grain rests against my shoe like it has a will of its own. I bend to pick it up and the weight is immediate, far denser than its size should allow. The carved eye on its surface seems to blink as I turn it in the light, though I tell myself it is just the shifting gleam from the metal shard far above. The Romans used grains of gold as ceremonial tokens in some imperial games and offerings, but none were inscribed like this. Fringe accounts suggest that certain mystery cults treated gold not as currency but as a key, literally a shaped marker to unlock hidden shrines. I slip it into my palm and the metal is warm, almost uncomfortably so. I look back toward the granary door, still ajar. And though the gap has not widened, I feel the same faint warm breath escaping, brushing my face in slow intervals. I retreat toward the far archway of the courtyard and find myself in a new street, narrower, the paving stones uneven as if the ground beneath has shifted. The air here is still and dry, but faint murmurs thread through it, words in Latin so old and slurred that I can only catch fragments, something about fates and days remaining. The buildings on either side are taller, looming at angles that make the sky a thin strip of bronze above. I pass a series of closed wooden doors, each with iron nails hammered into patterns. Circles, crosses, one with a spiral. Historians still debate whether these nail patterns were protective symbols or property marks, but here they feel more like warnings. The murmurs grow louder as I approach an open space where an ancient fountain stands dry, its basin cracked, the central column carved into the form of Saturn holding a scythe, the blade missing. The murmurs stop entirely the moment I step inside the square, replaced by a faint ticking sound, like a clock, which makes no sense in a city that predates such mechanisms. The sound draws me toward the edge of the square where a narrow passage opens between two buildings. The walls here so close I can touch both at once. Halfway through I find a small alcove at shoulder height. Inside rests a bronze tablet, thin as parchment but etched with fine lettering. Most of it worn except for a single line that gleams as if freshly engraved. Septem Nox, 7 nights. I feel the weight of the inscription settle into me, recalling the oath I read about before, the one promising a way out if I fed the city one memory. Fringe scholars claim certain urban legends about ghost cities were tied to numerological bindings. Counting days like a slow tightening of a snare, I pocket the tablet and move on, emerging into a dim courtyard where laundry hangs frozen in mid-sway, each tunic and toga stiff as if carved from stone. The faint ticking continues, now clearly coming from the direction of a small shrine at the far wall. I approach and find that the shrine holds a clay jar with a reed protruding from it. Each time the reed shifts, the ticking sounds, like a metronome for some unseen ritual. I lift the jar and the ticking stops. The courtyard's silent again. I open the lid just enough to glimpse inside and see a single curled object, pale and almost translucent. It looks like a seed pod but shaped like a human ear. I shut the jar quickly and replace it in the shrine. As I turn to leave, the laundry shifts slightly, a single toga moving as though brushed by invisible hands, and the ticking resumes now faster. I step quickly back into the narrow passage but stop short when I see the golden grain has rolled out of my pocket and sits in the dust ahead. It's carved eye looking up at me, unblinking this time, and from somewhere behind me, in the courtyard I have just left, comes the unmistakable sound of cloth tearing slowly, as if the frozen laundry has decided to move all at once. The amphitheater receives me like a mouth that forgot how to roar. The oval yawns beneath the bronze sky and the seats climb in pale rings, every bench worn smooth by hands that are not here now. I slip out of a shadowed vomitorium and pause at the edge where the arena floor should feel like a beach, fine grains of crushed stone. Latin calls it harina, the word that gave arenas their name. I put one foot forward and watch the print form cleanly, heel to toe, then inhale, blink, and the mark is gone as if a patient hand has brushed it smooth. I try again and again it resets. The surface unmarked and freshly combed. Somewhere above a loose shutter rattles twice and then decides it has said enough. I tell myself to count my breaths the way the augurs might have counted birds. Slow in, slower out, except here the sky never changes and the birds I keep expecting do not cross it. I think of the hourglass that dumped its sand all at once, of the sundial that would not bother to keep the day moving, and even though the silence is thick it carries a faint coarseness, the rasp of rope on beam. I step onto the sand, feel the cool grit through my soles, and test the surface with a gentle scuff. It records my movement long enough to prove I am here, and then, with a sigh like a cat settling, erases me. If cleaning crews ever had it this easy, the empire might still be open late hours. I remember that snapped rope from the galleries we barely glanced in the other night, the intention in that frayed end, the suggestion that falling was expected here, and I tell myself I will keep to the center and give the walls nothing to work with. The Romans knew how to manage a crowd, tunnels and stairs guiding thousands with a speed modern stadium designers still admire. But a single human in a stadium is just a thought in a skull. And a thought is easy to misplace. I walk the oval, my path correcting itself like a compass that keeps finding a different north. There is a scent under the dust that should not be here, a thread of fennel and that oily sweetness I touched in the sweating amphorae, closer to resin now, like pitch, the kind used to seal boats, the kind that burns stubbornly. I pause where gatekeepers would have stood, the portcullis above a mouth of iron teeth, and lay my hand to the wood where animals once waited. The grain is unscarred, too perfect, as if no claw ever tested it. The Colosseum in Rome had a hypogeum beneath its floor, a grid of cages and lifts to conjure animals and scenery on cue. Not all amphitheaters had that. Some were simple earth and sand, but this one hums faintly at the edge of hearing like a hive with the queen on strike. I kneel and touch the sand again. It is cool and dry, and it pulses once under my palm, then lies to me about it. Historians still debate the hand signals of the crowd. Pollice verso, thumb turned, life or death. Some argue thumbs were pressed to the fist for mercy. Others that the gesture is a later invention. What I know is that every seat here seems to lean a fraction forward the way a person does when the moment is about to tip. I look up and picture awnings stretched across the top. Valeria catching the wind like a fleet of ships. Sailors from the fleet of Misenum were said to handle those ropes. Clever, practiced, quietly indispensable. Fringe detail creeps in. Stories that some smaller towns strung charms into the rigging. Little bronze eyes to keep envy off a winning gladiator. I would laugh, except there is a bronze eye in my pocket already, in the shape of a golden grain, and it feels heavier now. I circle the arena and find a stair that curls toward the upper gallery. The steps are shallow and polite, inviting thousands to flow. I am not thousands, so they creak just a little under me. As if disappointed, the galleries smell of dry timber and old smoke. The kind that clings to beams long after festivals flicker out. I see the rope there on a crossbeam, the frayed end swollen like a flower gone to seed. It dangles over the aisle where a vendor would have cried fresh olives and watered wine. I raise my hand to test the swing and stop because the rope moves first, a soft arc right to left like a pendulum remembering its math. Then still, I angle my body to look along the beam and find the pulley, wooden wheel, iron pin. The groove is polished to a shine by use and by something wetter. There are tiny flecks on the beam that catch the light, perhaps just resin or the oil from a thousand tired hands. The rope smells faintly of fennel. I smile despite myself, and the laugh goes nowhere. 3 seats down, a wicker basket sits collapsed, the kind a runner might use to shuttle messages. Its lid is tied with a short length of cord in a sailor's knot I do not know how to tie. I lean over the railing to look at the floor and watch the sand erase an entire path at once. Not following my footsteps in order, but smoothing random sections like a lazy tide. It makes a pattern that looks briefly like a palm, and then that is gone too. I walk the aisle and step twice on the same spot. The rope above stays still, the air keeps its secrets. A small gust slides through the opening where the valerium would have been. It carries dust across my face, and in that dust I smell seawater. I close my eyes and pretend the murmur of a crowd is behind me. It almost works until I open them and see the seats lean in again just a fraction. There is history layered in this place, and I can feel it press and lift like a tide. I hear a tiny click from the corridor behind me. I follow it into the shadowed ring corridor and find a restricted doorway marked with 3 vertical cuts. The door is ajar. Inside the room is narrow, lined with shelves, coils of rope, wooden wedges, iron hooks shaped like question marks. Against the far wall, a winch sits with its ratchet poised, the handle tied off with a single knot. I imagine the rope once led down to a snare in the passage. I loosen the knot, and the handle stirs under my hand like a sleeper annoyed at dawn. I retie it fast and back out. When I return to the balustrade, the rope on the beam no longer dangles. It lies across the rail like a sleeping snake. I set my palm beneath it without lifting and feel warmth gather there. The rope slides across my skin with the tiniest rasp. It wants to lead me. I let it guide me toward a stair that dives back to the tunnels. The rope stops tugging when I find a new gate. Barred but with slack in the mechanism. I peer through and see only darkness speckled with dust, until the dust swirls like someone exhaled. I follow the wall and find an opening that leads under. The seating to a maintenance gallery. Cramped, beams crossing like ribs. There is a bench and on it a small jar with a reed lid like the one that ticked in the laundry courtyard. I leave it sealed. The golden grain pulses again. It's carved, I feels as if it is trying to point. I hold it out and the warmth seems to tug toward the arena floor. I go back to the railing and look down. The sand is not erasing now. It is writing, shallow lines blooming. A circle, then a second circle inside it, then a line that becomes a path. I follow with my eyes and see where it ends. At the center a small dark oval appears. I place the golden grain in the center. It hums like a fly trapped in amber, and the seam opens just enough to let the smallest breeze lift out. It smells of fennel and ink and damp straw. The breeze shapes a syllable I cannot catch, then withdraws. The hatch does not open further. The lines in the sand redraw themselves, erasing the path until only my fresh tracks remain. Then those vanish and the floor goes perfectly smooth. The sky relaxes back to its patient bronze. I stand there, at the center of a stage that wants me to play a part one do not know. This place is ready. It has been ready. It is only waiting for the cue. I pick up the golden grain. Its heat settling, and the sand under my shoes erases me one more time just to make sure I have not confused myself with someone important, and somewhere in the rafters a length of rope swings. A gentle arc, not a threat yet, more like a nod. Yes, yes, we see you, we are patient, we have 7 nights to spend and we prefer to start on time. The rope's slow arc fades until it hangs still, the air settling as if the amphitheater has drawn a long breath and decided not to let it out. I take one step back and the sand underfoot shifts just enough to register my weight. Not collapsing, not erasing me entirely, just a reminder that it knows I am here. I make my way toward the nearest exit tunnel, the vaulted passage yawning ahead, its stone ribs casting shadows like the bars of a cage. The sound changes inside. The openness of the arena replaced by a close, muffled hum, and beneath it the faintest trickle of water. The air cools and the smell of fennel softens, replaced by a hint of charred wood. My hand brushes the wall and finds a smoothness that feels deliberate, polished by something other than time. Historians still debate whether some amphitheater substructures were finished to such precision for aesthetic reasons or because certain surfaces were meant to conduct sound or vibration. Here the effect is unsettling. Each step I take seems to echo twice, as though someone else is walking just out of sight. I emerge into a small chamber where the ceiling drops low, the floor set with rough paving stones in a spiral pattern. At the center of the spiral sits a square stone table, its surface etched with a grid of squares, like a game board but with no pieces. In the corner an amphorae lies on its side, cracked but still weeping a thin dark liquid that glistens like oil. Fringe accounts from obscure inscriptions tell of ritual games played underground, moves recorded on stone while an amphorae bled wine or ink until the rite was complete. I kneel to touch one of the grid squares and my finger comes away damp, though the stone itself is dry, as if the moisture is only visible when contact is made. A faint chime rings from somewhere. Beyond, a single note that does not fade so much as withdraw. I follow the sound into a narrow corridor where the walls are carved with reliefs of animals, boars, lions, stags, all in motion. Yet every eye in the carvings is turned toward me. The corridor ends in a wooden door reinforced with bronze straps, each strap stamped with a series of marks like small crescents. I push and it opens with surprising ease into a room lit by a shaft of bronze daylight from a crack in the ceiling. The beam falls perfectly onto a low altar of marble. Atop it a shallow bronze bowl filled with what look like dried seeds. I step closer and realize they are not seeds but tiny carved eyes. Each different, each imperfect, some smooth, some pitted, one missing a corner as if bitten. I recall fringe theories about Roman protective charms, fascina shaped to watch over thresholds. Yet this feels less like protection and more like a gathering. as if each eye was placed here to bear witness. I reach toward the bowl and a soft shuffle stirs in the shadows. I freeze, the sound repeats, not closer but circling. The light from above flickers slightly as dust drifts across it. I take one of the carved eyes, its surface warm and faintly rough, and the shuffling stops instantly. The silence that follows is so dense it feels like the air has thickened. I slip the eye into my pocket next to the golden grain, the two objects touching like they recognize each other. A slow vibration hums against my leg. I back out of the room and retrace my path. But when I reach the spiral-floored chamber, the grid on the table is no longer empty. A small piece sits at the center, a perfect miniature of the amphitheater. I lean closer and see that one section of the model is missing, replaced by a hollow that leads downward. A tiny open hatch exactly where I stood moments ago in the real arena. Before I can process it, the piece shifts slightly on its own, aligning itself with an unseen pattern. The hum in my pocket deepens, and the spiral beneath my feet feels like it is turning even though the stones remain still. From far away, faint but unmistakable, comes the slow creak of rope under tension, as if something above is being prepared to drop. The creak above is patient but insistent, each groan of the rope followed by a pause long enough for me to imagine it fraying one strand at a time. I glance up, though there is no sky here, only the damp stone ceiling veined with hairline cracks. A faint grit sprinkling my shoulders as the sound continues. I grip the golden grain in my pocket, and the carved eye seems to look down instead of forward. Pulling my gaze to the spiral under my feet, the paving stones do not move, but the spiral feels deeper now, as if it could draw me inward just by breathing. I step carefully away and the sensation fades. The chime from earlier sounds again, this time shorter, like a command instead of an invitation. I follow it down a side corridor lit by slits in the wall. Thin beams of bronze light cutting across the dust. The air is heavier here, tinged with iron. I run my hand along the wall and find shallow grooves, each about the length of my palm. Repeating every few steps, historians still debate whether these grooves in Roman corridors were marks from tool storage, torches, or ceremonial spears. Fringe theories say they were channels for guiding unseen mechanisms. The grooves here feel too deliberate to be accidents. The corridor opens into a rectangular chamber lined with amphorae, all sealed but for one in the far corner with its wax cracked and lid slightly ajar. The scent of fennel is strong enough to make my eyes sting. I approach slowly, noting how the dust on the floor shows no footprints except my own. I reach the amphorae and tilt it just enough to see inside, expecting grain or oil. But instead there is a coiled rope submerged in dark liquid, the same rope smell from the arena galleries. I pull back quickly, droplets sliding down the amphorae's rim and vanishing before they hit the floor. I turn to leave and see a low arch on the opposite wall, crawling height only. I duck through and emerge into a cramped space with a domed ceiling blackened by soot. A small bronze brazier sits cold in the center, surrounded by a circle of clay tablets etched with numbers, all sevens, some scratched deeper than others. The repetition sets my teeth on edge. Mainstream Roman calendars marked special days with numerals, but I have never seen a set like this. Fringe accounts whisper about bindings set in 7-night cycles. I step over the tablets and find another arch, this one taller, leading into a tiered chamber like a miniature theater. Each stone bench occupied by a statue in a hooded cloak. The faces are featureless, smooth to anonymity, yet I feel every one of them turn toward me as I enter. The stage below is bare except for a single column about waist height, its top inset with a shallow depression shaped like an open palm. I know before I check that the golden grain will fit perfectly. My pocket feels hot now, almost burning. I place the grain into the palm and the heat drops instantly. The statues lean forward as one. The column sinks a fraction, and a grinding sound starts beneath the floor, slow and circular, dust trickling between the stones at my feet. The depression rises again. The grain back in my hand, though I never saw it move. The grinding stops, but the statues remain leaning, frozen in expectation. Then from somewhere far above comes the sound of a heavy release rope snapping taut, and I hear something massive descending through the layers of the city, not falling, but lowering with care, as if the city is delivering a piece of itself to me. I back toward the arch, but the statues seem closer than before, the cloaks brushing the edge of the steps, and the air in the room feels as though it is holding its breath. The rope voice fades into the bones of the building, and a side passage opens where there was only wall a moment ago. The air warms by a few careful degrees. Grit turns to smooth paving, and a faint polish of beeswax and olive oil floats ahead like someone has just finished tidying. I follow because pretending I have choices is the night's remaining hobby. The passage widens and gives me an atrium, a rectangular pool so still the bronze sky doubles itself without a seam. The rim of the impluvium worn to a satin by hands that are not here. The walls vivid with crisp panels, red and black frames around little scenes of a boy with a dolphin, a hunt, a bowl of figs that makes my stomach remember time. But the floor owns the room, and it waits. A carpet of tesserae laid out as a city scene from above, streets and porticos and courtyards rendered in a mapmaker's confidence. The tiny forum sitting like a square coin, the amphitheater an oval thumbprint. A line of aqueduct arches precise as teeth. I step to the edge and feel that cat-like shiver the city gives when I hover near a decision. Mainstream anchor to calm the nerves. Roman elites loved mosaics because they were durable and washable and could smuggle status underfoot. And water did run to houses like this in lead or clay, into basins and little fountains that whispered of practical luxury behind the walls. Debate for the notebook, historians still argue how common private libraries truly were. Letters boast about them, but the archaeology keeps its mouth shy. Fringe whisper to round out the set. Some household gods were rumored to borrow a memory from their family during certain fasts, returning it later like a mended cloak. I breathe and crouch and lay a palm on the streets. The tesserae are cool but not indifferent. A hairline of light tightens into a route that threads the forum, skirts the sundial whose shadow will not bother to move, glances off the basilica's steps, hesitates at the oval of the arena like it recognizes my shoes, then slides to a house marked with a laurel, and ends on a small sign that could be a key or an eye. I test it, close my eyes, and the path thickens as if agreeing to guide me. Open them and it narrows to a hair. Shy guide, very funny, I can play that game. I take the golden grain from my pocket, the carved eye warmer than it should be, and set it at the forum square on the floor map. A hum rises as soft as the fan you forget you left on. A side street brightens as if wetted, and a real doorway in the wall to my left decides it has always been there. I step through, and the corridor beyond is painted with birds that never move. Which is good, we love boundaries. But the dust garlands do, settling back into exactly the same drape after I disturb them, which is either masterful craft or petty magic, and I have no energy to pick. The receiving room offers a statue of a woman in stola and palla with her palm up like the column below the theater. I do not feed her the seed. I place instead the little bronze eye I stole. In the tunnels. And for a beat, the faint ticking I keep finding in this city stops, as if we passed a test of very boring manners. A curtain painted with bees trembles without wind and lets me into a peristyle. Garden where everything is perfect and wrong. Hedges are stone. Oranges are alabaster. Birds are bronze with mouths open as if to sing. The fountain smells like water without spending any. The hush here is thick enough that my breath sounds like sandals on gravel. In the far corner, a smaller court waits with a cousin to the first mosaic, only a handful of streets and a single route, and that route brightens the way a patient tutor does. Drifting when I blink and reforming when I stare. Mainstream aside to steady the knees, black and white mosaics were common in workrooms because they gripped and endured. Debate to taste, whether a patron designed these pictures or left them to craftsmen. The surviving contracts will not gossip, fringe nibble, some swore maps underfoot made a house walkable in dreams, practice for dangerous nights. I try the joke of choosing the path that points toward a doorway under a bull relief. Hello, Mithras, bad idea time. But the mosaic dims the bull and brightens a laurel threshold with a tiny bread stamp on its lintel instead. Dinner before doctrine, the city and my stomach finally agree on something. A pantry unwinds beside me, amphorae sweating that not water again. A thin, oily gleam that refuses to wet my fingertips even as it coats them. I wipe my hands and the sheen stays like a polite curse. A study follows, and on its low table a stack of wax tablets waits. The top tablet writes to my eyes before I touch it. Neat Latin in a steady hand. The mosaics remember for those who cannot. Do not walk where no stone agrees. Return the borrowed eye, 7 nights count only forward. The final line cut deeper as if someone kept needing the reminder. I do not turn around to see if the statue in the receiving room has her palm out again. I keep going and the path brings me to a long hall whose floor presents a third picture. A road between cypress rows, a black and white ribbon that lays down a new panel at my toes, with every blink and erases the piece behind. I take 1 step, then 2, the softest push rising through the soles of my feet as if the house is easing me onward with cool hands. No trap springs, thank you, and at the end of the road a bronze plaque sits in the floor, warm to my fingers, inscribed with a round mouth and a short line like a very early joke about truth. The Bacca della Verita will belong to later centuries, but motifs travel faster than people. I set the golden grain into the smile and a faint chime answers from inside the walls. Then a sigh of rope somewhere far above, businesslike. I retrieve the seed and the plaque tilts flat as if nothing happened. On the way back, the big city mosaic in the atrium gives a last considerate twitch, adjusting one alley and a stair, and I understand it has decided I should exit not by the bull or the granary but by a postern I somehow missed twice. The door pretends it has always been where it is, would burnish to a blur of the bronze day, hinges that breathe a friendly syllable, and I step into an alley where my peripheral vision still sees the pale ribbon of path drawn along the shade. It waits at corners until I tilt my head left or right and then continues, patient as a librarian. I make a wrong turn on purpose to see if it scolds me, and it does not. The stones underfoot shuffle their pictures softly until they agree with my choice. I pass a niche where tiny footprints appear in spilled wine around Alara's shrine that has set out figs no one will taste. A second floor shutter exhales a breath that smells like bread for no one. Ration marks chalked for names that never arrive. And out at the city's quiet edge the boundary stones rise, pale and patient, their tops flicking silver when the bronze light finds them. The hum begins before I touch them. Not loud, just a presence that asks inside or outside. What is a line if not a thought we share? Historians still debate whether the sacred pomerium ever truly moved with imperial ambition or whether writers simply loved the metaphor of an elastic Rome. Fringe garnish. Some swore the stones themselves shifted at night to keep bad luck penned. I stand with a hand on the nearest marker and feel that low note recognize whatever I have become here. And when I turn back, the path rolls ahead like fresh parchment. It leads me past the forum sundial that refuses all labor, the basilica that drinks light without paying, and toward a door whose lintel bears a little bookmark I failed to notice earlier. Of course, the library I argued about with myself 5 minutes ago while pretending certainty. The cedar latch greets my hand like it has been waiting. Inside is narrow and high, shelves stacked with scrolls tucked like sleeping birds, a table with a lamp that does not flame but glows. Anyway, and on the floor a small mosaic of the city again, simplified now to just a forum square and a single alley. The alley runs into the square, stops, and then bends to the left each time I blink, as if slowly teaching me a drill. I listen for the chime and hear it, lower now, deeper in the walls, counting something I cannot. I hold the bronze eye above the picture and it warms. I place it gently and the alley brightens to a Clean white, then fades, a small payment returned with interest. I leave it there and the ticking I had not noticed stops. Outside, the bronze sky has not moved. My shadow holds still like a dedicated assistant, and the city, pleased with its lesson, lets the ribbon of path withdraw like a tide until only the ordinary stones remain. I linger one last beat at the atrium pool. Watch Neptune keep his fin to himself for once, and tell the room that I understand. The maps are promises only if I keep to stone that agrees. The jokes can stay small. And the 7 nights only count forward, which is a relief because I am already too far in to count back. The library door closes behind me without sound. Yet I feel the shift in air, as though the city just took another step in some slow dance I am only beginning to follow. The bronze sky peers down through a small oculus above, and for the first time since I arrived here, I sense an almost domestic stillness, the kind of quiet that happens when a room has just been tidied for company. The shelves run high and narrow, stacked with scrolls in perfect order, each bound in ribbon the color of dried blood. The smell here is not dust but parchment, olive oil, and the faintest trace of fennel that no amount of cataloging could erase. I move down the central aisle and trail my fingers over the ends of the scrolls, some marked in neat Latin, others in scripts I do not recognize. Mainstream fact drifts through my head to anchor me. Roman libraries, public or private, often house scrolls in niches with wooden doors to protect from damp. Here there are no doors, only the confidence of walls that have not known rain in centuries. The far table holds a set of wax tablets with styluses laid across them like waiting cutlery. I pick one up and the surface reshapes beneath my touch. Words pushing up from within until a full line sits where there was blankness. Remember the oath, it says, the strokes deep as if carved with urgency. I turn the tablet over and the wax is smooth, untouched. Fringe whispers insist that certain materials in ancient rituals could record without being written upon, leaving impressions meant only for the right hands. The lamp beside the table is not oil-fed but glows from within its bronze skin. A low golden light that makes my shadow stretch unnaturally long down the aisle. I set the tablet back and follow the light to a side alcove. Here a single shelf holds only 7 scrolls, each bound in plain linen, no title, no mark. When I pull the first free, it feels heavier than it should, as though the papyrus has been weighted with something unseen. I unroll it to find a detailed map of the city, but the streets shift slightly as I watch. Routes narrowing or widening, certain alleys vanishing, others appearing. The amphitheater is there, the forum, the granary, and a building I have not yet seen marked with a laurel crown. The map hums faintly in my hands, a sound I feel more than hear, and I think of the mosaic floors that guided me earlier, the idea that the city can choose which version of itself to show. I roll the scroll and return it to the shelf. The second scroll is lighter, and as it opens the writing is dense. A mix of inventory and something like a diary, bread delivered, names missing, torch lit though day stands, 7th night approaches. The phrase repeats enough that I start counting entries. There are 6 so far, and the ink on the last one is still glossy, as if set moments ago. I put it back quickly. The alcove's walls carry shallow carvings of laurel branches and bees, the same motif from the curtain that moved without wind. A third scroll unrolls to reveal sketches, faces, places, objects, drawn with a precision that makes them feel more like memories than art. One face is mine, caught mid-step in the amphitheater, eyes turned toward something unseen above. I do not remember standing like that. I replace the scroll, feeling the carved eye in my pocket warm as if to confirm the connection. Historians still debate whether Roman augurs kept pictorial records of omens or relied solely on verbal report. Fringe theories suggest certain cults believed recording an image fixed an event so it could be revisited or altered. The golden grain in my other pocket stays cool. Perhaps waiting, perhaps listening. I leave the alcove and find another table against the wall, this one covered in small bronze plaques engraved with symbols, some like letters, others like constellations. The top plaque bears a series of sevens arranged in a spiral, echoing the floor in the chamber where the rope began its descent. I lift it, and underneath is a hollow containing a single key, its teeth shaped like laurel leaves. I slide it into my palm, and the lamp beside me brightens, the bronze skin glowing with more urgency. A faint chime rings from somewhere outside, not sharp, but like a reminder being repeated. I step toward the exit, and as I pass the central aisle, I notice that one scroll I touched earlier is now missing from the shelf. The gap where it stood as clean as if nothing had been there at all. I do not remember hearing it fall. The door ahead stands slightly open, the bronze light spilling into the street. And when I step outside, the air has changed, cooler, heavier, as though the city has just remembered the exact count of nights left. Somewhere not far away, rope creaks again. This time with the rhythm of someone drawing it back up. The rope's retreat is unhurried, each pull punctuated by a pause that lets the tension settle back into the stone walls. I follow the sound through the narrowing streets until it fades to a memory, replaced by the faint scrape of something being dragged. The air is damp here, the bronze sky visible only as a thin sliver above, buildings leaning inward until their shadows knot together. The cobbles underfoot glisten as if freshly washed, though the smell is not rain but mineral water and faint fennel. My shadow clings tightly to my feet, refusing to stretch ahead. Mainstream fact floats up to keep me steady. Many Roman cities had covered lanes and arcades to shield markets from heat and rain, but this one feels built to keep light out rather than shelter shoppers. I pass a row of closed stalls, their wooden shutters carved with images of fruit, loaves, and fish, yet every carving has a small eye somewhere in its design, sometimes hidden in leaves, sometimes staring openly from the center. Fringe stories whisper that certain trades kept talismans carved into their shop fronts, not to protect stock but to watch for debts. I round a corner and find the source of the dragging sound, a shallow gutter along the lane carrying a slow ribbon of dark liquid, thicker than water, creeping toward a drain set in the base of a statue. The statue is of a man holding a scroll, but the scroll has no writing, just a flat surface polished to a mirror. I see my own reflection there, yet behind me in the image is a figure I do not see in the lane. Standing still, cloaked, face hidden, I glance back and the lane is empty. But when I turn again, the reflection still shows the figure. Closer now, I step away and the gutter's liquid suddenly quickens, vanishing into the drain as if pulled. The statue's mirrored scroll goes dull. I keep moving, entering a wider square where a line of columns stands roofless, each column wrapped in bronze bands etched with dates. Though some bands are blank, historians still debate the use of such date-marked architecture, whether it tracked construction phases or was ceremonial. Here the sequence is broken, years missing, others repeated, one date scratched over with the numeral 7. I walk between them and feel the air temperature drop with each blank band I pass. At the far end of the square, a set of steps descends beneath an arch, the keystone carved with a pair of bees facing each other. I descend into a long hall lined with alcoves, each containing an amphorae half buried in sand, their necks sealed with a slab of wax that looks too fresh. One amphorae near the center trembles slightly, just enough for the sand around it to shift. I do not touch it. Instead, I note the faint chime that sounds whenever it moves, the rhythm irregular, almost like breath. Fringe theories about Roman storage vaults claim some were designed to respond to sound or vibration, to wake only when disturbed. I leave the hall and emerge into a smaller courtyard where a low fountain sits dry, its basin filled with carved stone eyes like those in the bronze bowl on the altar. This time the eyes are all cracked, some in halves, others chipped. The cracks fit together like a puzzle, but none are whole. I crouch to examine one and feel a pulse under my fingertip. Faint but present, I pocket it beside the bronze eye and golden grain, the weight between them shifting slightly as though they are adjusting to each other. From a doorway ahead comes the smell of bread, warm, fresh. utterly wrong in this silent city. I step inside and find a small bakery, loaves resting on shelves, their crusts gleaming as if brushed with oil. The shapes vary, round, long, braided, but each has a single mark pressed into its center, and I again, smaller than the others but unmistakable. I lift one loaf and it is heavier than bread should be, the crust warm but the center cold, like stone. I set it back and the warmth lingers on my palm. Behind the counter a narrow stair rises. Its treads worn deep. I climb and find a small room with a single window. Through it the view is not of the street below but of the amphitheater's interior, empty. Sand smooth, yet as I watch a path begins to form. The same shallow lines that led me to the hatch before, the path stops halfway this time, ending in a circle, and inside that circle something dark is being lowered slowly on a rope. The dark shape sways as it descends, the rope above taut and steady. No creak, no sound of pulleys, only the faint hiss of air parting around the object. I press closer to the window but the glass here is thicker than it looks, clouded just enough to blur edges. I can make out that it is not a person but a container, cylindrical, bronze or iron, with bands around it like a storage jar for something too dangerous to leave. Unbound, the sand beneath is already shifting to make space, smoothing itself like a host laying a table. I turn from the window and the room tilts slightly, my vision catching on a map pinned to the wall, sketched in charcoal on plaster. The city is there, but only certain buildings are marked: a laurel-crowned house, the granary, the amphitheater, a small square I do not recognize, each connected by faint lines that seem to pulse if I stare too long. Mainstream anchor to keep my mind steady. Roman surveyors mapped cities with a precision that still surprises engineers, using chroma and chorobates to set their grids. But no known map ever showed a city this alive. Fringe note whispers that in some ritual geographies, the streets themselves were thought to channel intent, a pattern only visible to those bound. Within it, I step back and the lines on the map dim, the rope outside still feeding its burden to the arena. Curiosity wins and I head down the narrow stair, past the bakery shelves. Each loaf I mark now turned toward the door as though watching me leave. Outside the air feels closer, carrying the metallic scent of bronze and a faint sweetness like figs left too long in the sun. I take a side street toward the amphitheater, passing a row of tall doors each sealed with a wax disc bearing the numeral 7. The wax is fresh, edges clean, no dust on their surfaces. I touch one and feel heat under my fingers. Not from the sunless day but from within. Historians still debate whether some Roman locks included heat-treated seals as proof against tampering, but here the seal feels less like a warning and more like a heartbeat. I keep moving, the streets tightening until I am funneled into a covered passage. The ceiling low, the walls lined with shelves of folded linen, each piece stamped with a laurel and an eye. Fringe accounts speak of cult vestments hidden away between ceremonies, each set intended for a specific night. I brush one and it crumbles into fine dust that leaves a cool film on my fingertips. The passage opens directly into the lower ring of the amphitheater, where the air is warmer, smelling of rope, oil, and fennel. The sand at the center holds the dark cylinder now fully lowered, its surface damp as though it has traveled through water. The rope detaches on its own and coils neatly beside it, a gesture both polite and final. I descend into the arena, each step leaving prints that linger this time, as if the city wants me to see my path. The cylinder is as tall as my chest, the bronze bands around it engraved with scenes of ships, waves, and a bull-headed figure driving them. I circle it and find a small panel inset with a depression shaped like an open palm, exactly like the one in the hooded statue theater. My pockets feel suddenly heavy, the golden grain warm, the bronze eye cooler but thrumming faintly. I set both into the palm, the fit perfect, and a low hum begins, resonating through the sand, up my legs, into my chest. The cylinder shivers once, twice, Then the top unlocks with a slow twist, the lid lifting as though drawn by invisible hands. Inside is darkness deeper than shadow, the kind that swallows the bronze light entirely. I lean closer and see not emptiness but movement, ripples like water, but thicker, slower, carrying fragments of reflection. My face, the rope, the mosaics, all flickering and vanishing. A faint chime rings from below, answered by another far above. The lid holds itself open as though inviting me to reach in, and somewhere in the stands, just beyond my vision, something shifts in its seat to watch. The rippling dark inside the cylinder seems to lean toward me, its surface forming shallow peaks and valleys without breaking, each motion drawing faint reflections up from somewhere deeper than I can see. I watch my own face fragment and reform between images of places I have already walked. The sweating amphorae in the market, the sundial whose shadow refused to move, the rope swinging in the gallery, and then faces I do not know, some smiling faintly, others turned away. My hand hovers over the surface and the heat from the golden grain in my pocket pulses in answer. The carved eye presses against my palm as if urging contact. Mainstream fact to anchor me, certain Roman cult vessels, especially in mystery rites, were designed to hold liquids used for scrying, mixing wine or oil with water to reveal signs. Fringe speculation claims some held no liquid at all but a kind of living darkness, meant to mirror not the present but the city's own memory. I lower my fingertips until they barely touch the surface and the ripple spreads instantly, carrying my touch outward in a perfect circle. The hum from the bass grows louder, the bronze bands around the cylinder vibrating until the engraved ships seem to rock on imagined waves. My vision tightens as though the light in the arena has dimmed. Yet when I glance up, the bronze sky is unchanged. I pull my hand back, but the ripple continues, widening until it laps against the rim, droplets lifting upward like inverted rain. They drift toward me and cling to my skin, cold at first then warming to match my body, each one holding a tiny shifting image before melting into nothing. The hum steadies into a slow rhythm, almost a heartbeat, and the sand beneath my feet shivers. I look down and see the lines forming again, not from my steps but from below, a series of concentric circles radiating out from the cylinder, the inner ring marked with small symbols, keys, laurel leaves, and sevens, each glowing faintly before fading. I step back and the cylinder's lid begins to close on its own, the movement smooth and unhurried. As though confident I have seen enough, the rope at its side stirs and slithers toward the bronze bands, wrapping them once, twice, before coiling back into place. The hum stops, leaving the arena utterly silent. Fringe thought flickers. Some ancient devices were believed to reset themselves when the observer had taken what was needed, withholding the rest until the proper night. I leave the center and climb the nearest stair to the galleries. The seats lean forward again, their shadows longer now as though the sun has shifted though the sky insists it has not. At the top of the stair I find a doorway I do not remember, narrow, framed in stone with bees carved into each corner. I pass through into a covered walkway that curves gently upward, its walls lined with niches, each holding an object, bronze mirrors, small clay lamps, folded linen. A loaf of bread with its crust hardened to stone, none of them dusty, all arranged as if waiting to be chosen. I take nothing, but the golden grain in my pocket feels heavier with each step, until the walkway ends in a balcony that looks not over the arena but over a different part of the city entirely. A district of low-roofed houses and narrow streets I have not walked. The sight is crisp, clear, almost inviting, and from somewhere far off in that quarter comes the slow, measured creak of a rope wheel turning. The rope wheel's turning is deliberate, each rotation punctuated by a faint metallic click, like a lock resetting itself over and over. I step onto the balcony rail and lean out to fix the sound's origin. The low-roofed quarter stretches away in a tidy grid, streets too narrow for carts, the kind built for foot traffic and shadows. The rooftops are tiled in deep red and glisten faintly as though they have been freshly washed. Mainstream fact to anchor myself. Roman insulae often crowded entire neighborhoods into vertical blocks, shopfronts below and cramped living above. But this place feels curated, too clean, too still. Fringe theory rises with the heat. Certain districts in ghost city legends were said to be reset overnight, their contents rearranged for the next day's watchers. The rope's sound stops mid-turn, leaving the air feeling emptier than it should. I take the narrow stair down from the balcony, winding through a colonnade where the capitals are carved with repeating sevens instead of leaves. The floor mosaic shows a map again, this one reduced to a single street leading from the amphitheater to a square marked with a laurel. I follow it in stone and then in life. Stepping out into the lane below, the walls here are painted with faded frescoes of harvest scenes. Men gathering wheat, women holding baskets of figs. But every figure's face is rubbed away too. Smooth plaster. I turn a corner and find the square itself. A perfect rectangle paved in alternating black and white stones. At its center stands a tall wooden frame, the rope I heard threaded through a pulley at the top, ending in a heavy hook that dangles just above the ground. Beside it rests a shallow stone basin filled with water so still it looks like glass. I step closer and see that the hook's reflection in the basin is wrong. It shows the hook lowered into the water and something hanging from it. A bundle wrapped in dark cloth. I glance up and the real hook is empty. I watch the reflection as the cloth bundle stirs slightly, then stills, then stirs again. Historians still debate whether some Roman execution devices were also used ceremonially, marking not punishment but transition. Fringe accounts speak of hooks and weights used in initiation rites, lowering objects into water to be cleansed before presentation. I crouch by the basin and the surface trembles as if aware of my gaze. The reflection shifts, showing not the hook at all now but a street I do not recognize. The golden grain in my pocket grows warm, the carved eye colder, the two pulsing in alternating beats until I can feel the rhythm in my fingertips. I touch the water and the cold is instant, biting. The image inside clears to reveal a doorway framed with laurel branches, a shadow moving just inside. I withdraw my hand and the water stills, empty once more. Behind me the rope creaks softly and I turn to see it swaying though no wind moves. The hook swings toward the basin and stops, perfectly centered over it. The square stones beneath my feet feel subtly uneven, forming a pattern I only notice now. A spiral leading toward the basin, echoing the chamber from earlier where the rope began its descent. I take one step back and hear a faint chime, then another. Then the rope begins to lift itself, the hook rising toward the pulley with no visible force, disappearing into the frame until only the swaying shadow remains. The air warms, the fennel scent returns, and from the far end of the square a narrow door swings open, revealing a dim corridor that smells of bread and smoke. The corridor beyond the narrow door feels like it belongs to a bakery, the air thick with the scent of crust and smoke. But the heat is uneven, pockets of warm air mixing with stretches of cool draft that smell faintly of wet clay. The walls are lined with wooden racks, each holding loaves shaped into unfamiliar patterns. Rings, braids, spirals, every loaf stamped in the center with the mark of an eye. The same motif I have been finding from the amphorae too. The altars, mainstream fact slips in. Ancient Roman bakers often marked bread with distinctive stamps for identification, especially when baking communal loaves in shared ovens. But here the marks are too uniform. Every eye carved with unsettling precision. Fringe lore comes to mind, tales of offerings disguised as bread to feed not people but household spirits. I run my hand above one loaf without touching, and feel a faint vibration, as if something inside is breathing. I move deeper, the racks giving way to a low stone counter where several wax tablets lie scattered, each covered in neat rows of names followed by dates. Most dates repeat the same numeral, 7, and the final column is left blank, A metal stylus rests across the last tablet. Its tip still warm. I step past the counter and find a brick oven taller than me. Its mouth dark and cold. Yet when I peer inside, the air shimmers as if with heat. I catch a faint reflection on the curved interior wall. Not my face, but the amphitheater's floor. The hatch at its center open. Rope descending into the dark. I blink and the image is gone. I straighten and notice a side passage branching off, narrow and tiled with a mosaic of wheat stalks bending in an invisible breeze. I follow it into a circular chamber with a central pillar. The pillar carved to resemble stacked bread loaves, each with an eye in its crust. The top loaf is slightly larger, its eye deeper, forming a depression shaped exactly like the palm prints I have seen before. My pockets grow heavier. The golden grain heating first, then the bronze eye answering with a steady thrum. I place both in the depression and the room exhales, the sound of distant grinding echoing up from below. The mosaic floor begins to rotate slowly, aligning a line of darker tiles with a hidden archway. The arch slides open, revealing a stair spiraling down into darkness. The grinding fades, replaced by a slow, rhythmic slosh like water moving in a confined space. I descend, the air cooling, the fennel scent stronger, until I emerge in a vaulted chamber where long troughs of water run parallel. Their surfaces so still they seem solid. Small bronze ladles hang from hooks, each inscribed with the numeral 7. I dip one and the water clings thickly before releasing. In its surface I see not my reflection but the rope again, lowering something into the arena. The same dark cylinder now open, its interior glowing faintly. I drop the water back into the trough and the image shatters, the glow extinguished. The hum in my pocket stops, leaving only the sound of dripping in the far corner. I turn toward it and see a narrow chute in the wall, water trickling from its mouth. The flow steady and precise. As if measured, the chute feeds into a small stone basin. And in that basin rests a single golden grain identical to mine, except its carved eye is closed. The rope slithers ahead like it knows the route better than I ever could, each coil gliding over the stones without snagging, leading me through the far gate into a corridor where the air is cooler, carrying the scent of damp mortar and faint beeswax. The bronze sky is gone now, replaced overhead by a low arched ceiling ribbed with stone. The light comes from narrow slits along the upper walls, thin blades that catch drifting motes in a way that makes them seem to hang in place. Mainstream fact to ground me: Roman passageways in arenas often connected to service tunnels or animal pens, winding in patterns meant to confuse those unfamiliar. But this one runs arrow straight, as if cut for a singular purpose. Fringe stories whisper of processional corridors used only on specific nights, when the city itself was part of the rite. The rope pauses at a bronze-bound door, its surface engraved with 2 bees flanking an open eye. I push and it yields with a sigh, revealing a circular chamber with 7 evenly spaced columns, each column bound at the base with a bronze band etched with a different symbol: key, laurel, bread, amphorae, rope, wave, and an unmarked blank. The rope coils in the center and stops beside a raised plinth shaped like a palm. My pockets grow heavy. The golden grain hot, the dormant grain colder still, the bronze eye humming faintly. I set the grain with the open eye into the palm and the columns respond in sequence, each humming a note that blends into a low chord. The blank column hums last and the air shifts, a section of the wall sliding inward to reveal a short stair. I retrieve the grain and follow down into a space lit only by a single hanging lamp, the flame small but steady, casting gold over a long stone table, laid out with objects I have seen before but never together. A loaf with the eye mark, a small amphorae sweating that strange oil, a coil of rope tied in a sailor's knot, a bronze plaque with the 7 engraved deep, a mosaic tile depicting a laurel wreath, and in the center a shallow bronze bowl filled with still water. I step closer and the water stirs without my touch, showing the arena once more. The sand marked with concentric circles like those the cylinder made. Then the image shifts to the map mosaic in the atrium, its streets now glowing faintly, all routes converging on one place. A building I do not know, its roof marked with the same open I carved on the door above. I blink and the image dissolves into a reflection of my own face. Then nothing but water again. The lamp flickers and steadies. And somewhere high above, faint but distinct, the rope wheel turns once more, this time faster, as though the city is winding itself for what comes next. The turning of the rope wheel above quickens, each rotation a little sharper, the sound threading down through the columns and into the chamber like a spine tightening. I pocket the golden grain, the dormant grain, and the bronze eye, their combined weight pulling at my hip. Then step back from the table, the low chord from the columns still lingering as if the stone remembers the vibration. The short stair leads me upward into the circular room again, but now the air is warmer, faint motes drifting faster in the light slits, as though stirred by something moving elsewhere. The rope waits in the center, coiled and patient, its tail pointing toward an archway I had not noticed before. I follow it into a corridor that slopes gently down. The walls lined with recesses holding clay tablets, each marked only with a number, 1 through 7. Repeated over and over, mainstream fact to anchor me. Roman record keepers used wax and clay both, clay for permanence, wax for daily business, but this feels like neither. The repetition is too perfect, too deliberate. Fringe thought slides in. Some rites counted days like stepping stones, marking each with a physical object so the cycle could be seen and touched. The rope leads me into a wide, low chamber where the floor is an unbroken circle of black basalt. Cool under my shoes, the only feature a narrow slit at its center, from which rises a slow curl of air smelling of fennel, sea salt, and smoke. The rope slides toward it, dipping its end into the slit and holding there. I step to the edge and peer down, seeing only darkness that seems to deepen as I watch. The golden grain heats sharply in my pocket. The dormant grain chills further, and the bronze eye hums until I can feel it in my jaw. I kneel and lower the active grain toward the slit. The air rushes upward in a sudden warm draft, carrying a sound like distant waves colliding with stone. The rope stirs, winding itself once around my wrist, not tight but certain, and in the dark below something shifts with a deep, deliberate scrape. The basalt floor under me vibrates in a slow rhythm, matching the hum in my pocket. Then the rope releases and withdraws from the slit, coiling neatly beside it. The air cools again, the scent fading, and from a side arch a new passage yawns open. The stones underfoot different here, smoother, with faint carved lines running like veins, leading me upward until I emerge behind the amphitheater's highest tier. The bronze sky stretched wide and unmoving, the city laid out silent and expectant. From here I can see the laurel-marked roof from the mosaic's vision, its tiles catching the light in a way no other building does. And though no rope is in sight now, the faint sound of its wheel turning drifts through the stillness, counting down the nights that remain.